So just by show of hands, can you guys raise your hand if you're graduating this year and getting ready to interview for going out into the working world?
This year, like June? Or this year, like
May, June. So this would be your last year of school before. All right, so that's about half. So that's helpful. So I was asked to talk about career planning and what's next. You know, how do you get into that working world, and what do you need to expect as you're thinking about interviewing? So I'm going to take you through just a couple points, and obviously we want this to be somewhat lighthearted, but also, you know, serious in the fact that you guys are preparing and competing against the rest of the working world, and I want to make sure that you know what it's like when you're sitting out there trying to present yourself to a prospective employer. So we'll talk about what our company is looking for, and executive interviewing techniques. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to prepare and what's different about how you prepare, because it's not just knowing the basics, and then defining your career and knowing what's next. So just high level view of kind of what we're going to go through. So what are healthcare companies looking for? I will tell you, when I was thinking about this, preparing for today, healthcare companies to a large extent are no different than any other company when you think about interviewing, right? Healthcare companies are looking for somebody who's got the job description down, so they're a fit as far as what it is that they've listed as far as what they need. They're looking for somebody, though, as well, who's a cultural fit. We're going to talk about culture a little bit more in this, because culture is really important to the organization as far as what you're bringing to the organization, but it's also really important to you, because you're going to spend more than half your time working in an organization. You got to make sure that you fit in, that you trust the people, that you feel like you can be successful, and that you have a career path. So culture's a big deal. They're interviewing you for it. You're interviewing them for it too, so don't forget that. In every role that I've had, and I've been working for over 25 years, I will tell you the ability to work in teams is really important. Whether you're, you know, a consultant, like, which is what I do, and you would expect it in that, but accountants, actuarial people, everyone today works with a diverse group of people. There are very few people who literally sit behind a desk and work alone. And I'm sure those jobs are there. I just don't see them very often. So I would say to you, the ability to work in teams, know how you work best in teams is really important. And then finally, you need to think about how you're going to add value beyond the basics. From a health perspective, I can tell you, when I'm talking to someone and interviewing them for a position, the fact that they understand what the trends are in healthcare is important to me. And I don't need them to understand every trend, and I don't need them to have an opinion about everything that's listed and others. But what I would say to you is, you need to know what's happening in healthcare. You know, if you want to be a hospital administrator, for example, the fact that you can be a hospital administrator is lovely. But the fact that you understand the impacts of the Affordable Care Act, or quality care and patient transparency, and all the things that are driving healthcare, it's important, and you need to have a point of view about that. So you may be asked it, you may not be asked it and want to volunteer it, but you certainly need to think about what your position is. So executive interviewing techniques. You know, you kind of think about, how am I going to stand out? You know that when an organization posts a job, they have a need, right? And so the question becomes, so how many people are they interviewing for this? And how am I going to look different than the 50 people they're bringing in to interview for this role? You really need to think about what you're bringing to the table that's different. So the first thing I would say to you is that it's important that you make a personal connection. They want to know you. They want to know what makes you you. So don't be afraid to share that. You know, they're going to ask you, tell me about yourself, and you want to tell them about your background, your career background. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the other thing that they're going to want to know is, what are some of your hobbies? What do you like to do? How do you like to spend your time? So you don't want to be too verbose in that, but you also want to share a little bit about yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're going to walk away, they're going to interview the next person, and the question is, are they going to remember your interview and why you were different? So definitely think about how you're going to connect with them. So the obvious things, right? Be prepared. Know about the organization, and don't just know like the tagline that's on the first page of their homepage on the internet. Know why you came in to work for them. So for example, if you're interviewing with DaVita, you want to know, what do they do? How are they different than their competitors? What is their strategy? Why do you want a job there? Because they're going to ask it. And if they don't, you want to volunteer it. It's important. Have questions ready that you want to ask them. You'll probably think of others while you're in the interview, but sometimes people get stuck. Like a lot of times when I'm interviewing someone, I'll leave the last 10 minutes or so of the interview for them to ask me questions. And I cannot tell you how many times the individual has said, oh, hold on, let me look. They flip to the page and it's questions like, so tell me about your mission. Okay, I can tell you about my mission, but if you think that's going to get you a job here, it's really not. So be ready with questions that are important to you. And I'm going to go through some examples of what I think are good questions, but you're going to have a bunch of others as you start brainstorming what's the best fit for you and why you think that you're the right fit for the job. The non-obvious questions, or the non-obvious interview questions that you're going to get are things like, you're going to get asked a question, and you're going to respond to that question, and you want to be able to give examples about your experience. And sometimes that's hard because not all of you have health experience to bring to the table, and that's okay, but you want to give examples even outside of industry. So if somebody asks you a question about, tell me an example of when you've worked on a team and it was difficult to get something done. What was your role on that team and how did you manage it? So you want to be specific in how you respond to that. And your example can be from school. That's fine. They know that they're interviewing somebody who's just coming out of school, but you need to be specific because they're trying to understand how you problem solve and how you interact with others and whether or not that the way you approach that is a fit within their organization. You want to demonstrate a breadth of experience. Don't give the same example over and over again. Think about how you're going to apply what your background is and what you've learned to what it is that they're interviewing for. And then we talked about leading trends and stuff. Don't overplay it. It's so easy to know when somebody's giving you canned responses and sounding like a salesperson. Just demonstrate that you have some understanding. That's what you're trying to do. And then how do you prepare? So I'm the mom of triplet girls who are 14. And my daughter was interviewing for first interview ever for a volunteer position at the Denver Zoo. Never interviewed before. And she said, Mom, I have no idea what to expect. We're driving to this interview. I'm like, okay, so let's brainstorm. What might they ask you? And so we're brainstorming questions and she's testing out her answers with me. And that's exactly what you need to be doing as you think about preparing for your interviews. If you were interviewing someone for this job, what would you ask? You guys have enough background to think through that. And they may ask only 20% of what you brainstormed, but the fact that you prepared is a big deal because you'll feel a lot more confident. So always know that they're going to ask the question, tell me about yourself. I don't know that I've ever been in an interview or interviewed someone who didn't ask that question. My daughter said the zoo asked her it too. If you spend 10 minutes of a 30-minute interview telling people about your background, you've already lost it. So, use time wisely. Tell me about yourself is, give me a 3 to 4 minute blurb about what your experience is and why that's relevant to what you're interviewing for. Why do you want to work here? And it can't be because I'd be a good hospital administrator. It has to be something about, because I understand your organization's mission is such and such, I feel like I really fit into that. I have friends who work here. I've learned this about you. I understand your goals, whatever it is. It's got to be relevant to the organization that you're talking to. So make it personal. In what sort of environments are you most successful? They want to know, do you team well? What sort of teams? Are you good with ambiguity? Do you like a lot of structure? There's no right answer because the answer has to be whatever's best for you because you're going to hopefully be working there. So you want a role that works best for your background. But be prepared for that question. And then I gave you an example of a potential question. And I will tell you at Ernst Young, we interview this way all the time. I've been in several interviews. Not all organizations use this technique. We found it to be really effective. It's behavioral type interview questions. So tell me about a situation when such and such happened. What did you do and what was the result? And often that leads into a conversation from there about more digging in. But be prepared for that type of questioning because you're going to need to give examples as part of your responses. There are several consulting firms that used to use case studies. And so they would give you a case, right? And they would say, so tell me how you would solve this. How would you start? Who would you talk to? What would you do? How would you lay out your approach? Would you do this or would you do that? I have seen less and less of that. Definitely not seeing that in industry. In consulting, I see that a little bit in more of the regional consulting firms than I do in the big four. But just, they're not going to tell you what their interview technique is. You kind of just need to be ready and be ready to think on your feet. That's what they're looking for, problem solving. So questions that you might want to have answered. What can I expect my first year of working here? How will I be evaluated? I mean, these are all fair questions, right? Please describe your culture to me. What makes someone successful here? What are your organization's values? What is your organization's strategy? Those are all fair questions to be asking. I would tell you from my experience, the question not to ask, don't ask them what your salary would be. If you go straight to salary, you're not getting the job. And often the person interviewing you doesn't know. That's something that you negotiate with HR later. Let you be offered the job and you counter that if you don't think it's right, but definitely don't ask a salary question in your initial interviews. So then, like, defining your career. So how do you think about where you go from here and knowing that you're transitioning into the work world? The first thing I would say is set goals. I think Vincent said it when he kicked off, you know, he didn't think he'd be doing today what he's doing today, and he didn't even know that role existed, right? And so when you set goals, set interim milestones, but be willing to change your goals. You're gonna learn so much when you get out there about what works well for you, about what you thrive in, about strengths that you didn't know you had, about weaknesses you didn't know you had. Your goals will change, but give yourself a chance to set those interim goals as you go through the process. Don't be afraid to share your whole self. My first career was actually as a school teacher, and I was interviewing for my first job on campus, and it was with the premier public school system in St. Louis, which is where I lived. And the interviewer started asking me about what I did in my free time, and I was into photography, so I told him that's what I did. And he said, well, how'd you get into that? Where do you do that? So I was talking about it, and told him about my dad and our dark room and all this stuff. And I got the job, and I couldn't get it. Like, how did that possibly get me the job? It's not like, how do I do a lesson plan? And how do I teach kids? He wanted to know me, and he wanted to know what I was bringing to the rest of the staff and to the students, and would I connect? So be ready to share a little bit of yourself. You've got to have energy and enthusiasm and demonstrate that you're interested in the place, because they do have a lot of people interviewing for these jobs, and you guys need to stand out. So show that enthusiasm, and it'll come through. And then we talked about culture, but definitely know you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And don't be afraid to say no to a job. There's a lot out there. You guys are very talented, or you wouldn't be here. So, you know, give it your best shot, but also know that it's okay to look at an opportunity once you learn more and figure out that that's not the best fit for you. And then I will tell you what my mom said to me when I was switching careers and got my master's and looking for what was next and wasn't sure what that was and had no idea how long it would take to find a job. And that is that finding a job is the hardest job you're going to have. So give yourself space and time, network a ton, learn from your experiences, ask questions, and be easy on yourself. You know, learn, but give yourself a break. This is tough going. Thanks for the opportunity.